Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to day 4. Unfortunately, we had a slight issue in terms of our speaker for this morning has had a severe family issue, which means he's had to go and care for his family, but they're in another country. So, of course, that makes the breakfast presentation slightly more awkward. But in the true spirit of Perfusion, we're going to try and work out how the hell we can do something as we're doing it. So let's see how good I am at improvisation. Before we kind of go on to some of that, so I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for going back again this morning. I hope everybody enjoyed the party last night. I know there were certainly a few people that did, I saw them. You don't worry, there will be no evidence of you dancing and with the giant flashing robot, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say, but there we go. So what we're going to try and do is move on to a discussion panel. One of the things that has been a recurring theme through this event is the idea that, we're trying to get out of these silos, whether it be the country one, the society one, how educational, and how can we do that? And so what I'm going to do is try and, as I say, wing it and try and talk about how we as the sustainable, if you like, the sustainable community, if you like, how we can do something to sort of move this forward, come up with an action plan, if you like. Now, obviously, what we're hoping is that we can have some volunteers, and I'm not looking at anybody in particular, that will help and come and sit on the stage and join this discussion. Otherwise, it's going to be a very one-sided monologue, which I don't think you really want. So give us a few seconds to get this all sorted, but then hopefully think about some of the questions that you would ask or some of the solutions that you oppose. And then what we do is really hand it over to you to sort of start us off, and we will then run with it from there. But think about how you could see this meeting, how could it help to bring these barriers down? And bearing in mind that as far as I'm aware, Mark might be able to tell me otherwise, but I believe that we reached 1,182 registrants, which is fairly phenomenal. And again, from all these different countries. So how is it that we can bring those together, rather than just in a virtual platform? How can we aid education, aid learning, aid the ability to move across some of those barriers? So have a think. I'm going to take a seat with my coffee, and then we will go from there. So thank you very much for listening and for bearing with us. Unfortunately, these things happen, and you have to just move with the times, as it were. So give me a second. That's much more comfortable. Right. So the first, I suppose, do we have any questions to start this off? Any comments or any thoughts? Is there anything that you think we could do better? Anything that you believe is missing that would aid us in trying to reach more people and bring more education to them? So it's always difficult when people are having breakfast as well. To think and talk and eat is always a bit of a difficult one.
Hello, test. Good morning. Anybody got foggy head? Yeah, so I think what you're trying to do is centralize everything into a central kind of server with an open source, so that everybody can put their research and citations into a community where everyone can have access to it. I've always thought that was something a lot of the organizations in Perfusion have tried to do. But as we've grown into a world market, I think there has to be some type of an approach, a website that is world Perfusion and secure, obviously, with two-factor identification. If you're a perfusionist, you get in. If you're not, tough luck. Not really, but just participate properly. And there's so many other access points in the world for medical stuff and citations that if we were able to share all that stuff into one source that is dealing specifically with perfusion, I think we would have a great database that everyone could build on and work with.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
welcome.
that's a very interesting thought. And, I suppose the first thing that comes to mind really is, as part of this meeting, could we, create that space that we can, have the learning on and what have you that we kind of bring into this situation. I know obviously this originates from perfusion.com, which has a lot of elements on that. So maybe we could sort of push that slightly further to, as you say, incorporate those things. I mean, knowing his love of two-factor authentication, Rob, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether you were taking a slight attack there, but I think, excuse me, I think you're absolutely right. But I'm going to take the opportunity to take what you've said and go at a little tangent for a minute and then swing back to what I think is a really important thing for us to do as a community. But for those of you who are lucky enough to hear the presentations in the last session yesterday, Stefan from the Ukraine presented to us. And it occurred to me that AMSECT through Justin Sweesman had set up a community to share ECMO equipment during COVID. And, that's really cool because the noise level just suddenly dropped. Because I think you're thinking what I'm thinking, which is we could set up a community to share what are our excesses, put them online such that the guys in the Ukraine could say, okay, if we all sent all the stuff we think we could donate, it would be an overload. But we've basically set up an inventory of what we have spare, and if they need it, then they can order it and we can get it to them. So maybe guys, if you want to talk about that as a potential community starting point, that might be a good way to get this morning going.
Yeah. So does anybody have any thoughts about how they would do that, or whether they could, be willing to almost lead on it with us in order to repurpose, I suppose, what Justin's done. I mean, maybe it's actually talking to Justin, maybe the first step, and that may come as no surprise. But I think that would be a great starting point. Has anybody got any thoughts on that?
I think if I think about how my staff would answer this question, I think, this is obviously a great symposium and it's very dense in its knowledge and information that's shared, but I think they would want a continuum throughout the year, smaller bites. So, I mean, there's several organizations, specialty care, others who do 1-hour webinars on a regular basis. And those seem to be very popular. And I think that's something that could be an aftermarket product to this symposium is maybe just, take some of the individual presentations and chop them down into smaller bite size so people don't have to invest a lot of time, but can still get that information.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I think I'm just trying to think how we could sort of facilitate that sort of fairly easily, and it's not within the middleman to sort of do these sort of online webinars, especially when, as we said, we've got people from all over the world that have joined the meeting online or in person, and I think there's a want to basically get involved, and it's about, I never have to sort of beg for people to come and talk. That's the other lovely thing, is there's so many people that are willing to share their knowledge, and I get emails all the time saying, hey, I've got this idea, and you listen to it and you say, great, that sounds wonderful, come and talk. So that's perhaps a way of doing it, and we can build that into as part of the Soundable package. Okay, so look, this is the costly registration, but included in that is bi-monthly or whatever it might be, sort of videos and online learning.
Hello. And one other thing I just was thinking about is the invitation of a YouTube site without the ads, every 5 minutes getting an ad, unless the manufacturers want to step in and help out. But there may be an avenue for the Perfusion Daily YouTube kind of thought.
I mean, from the point of view of actually you just made me think actually, the hands-on sessions that were held here today, over this last couple of days, they've been really popular and, very well attended. And one of the things that also occurred to me is that that's great when you are here, but not if you're outside and you can't really get involved. But there are a lot of videos that the manufacturers themselves have made of hands-on sessions and sort of expertise and other things. So, maybe with their help, we could put those online as part of this. And so people all around the world can learn from the sort of clinical trainers, if you like, of how to do these situations. And I think that would aid a lot of the sort of learning and a lot of teaching without having to all get together, which is always quite difficult. There's involves a lot of traveling. There was obviously flight issues coming into Sandoval this week. So I think there is an element that we could move some of this, or well, not duplicate it, but have an additional section online. Bridget, there was I think it's Nigel, yeah. But I think that's a great idea, and especially with the YouTube, there's so many options that we have there, and we also have the channel anyway, so that's a good idea.
Morning.
Buddy.
Yeah. Going back to Ukraine and shipping stock, the biggest logistical problem you will have is transport. I know we all would think, well, at least I was, well, except I can't because I haven't got any stock anymore, but there's stuff that we could easily give away that would be useful, but how do you get it there? And you will probably need to talk to people who do it, like FedEx. I mean, what was the chain? What was Bill's thing? Yeah, Cardiac Alliance. I mean, they were based in Memphis, and FedEx shifted all of their stuff for free. They would pallet it as put it in a warehouse.
Richard.
But
So
there must be charities that are already doing that.
And as in all these things, I was actually having a conversation a few months ago with a potential PhD student that must come and work with me, and we were talking generally, and we had a supervisor and somebody else that was going to assist. And as a throwaway comment, a guy who's at the Brompton in London, he said, well, he has been organising the sort of manoeuvring of old hospital beds, old pumps, everything else that he ships across to hospitals in Ukraine, and was looking to see if there would be anything within the UK that we could sort of donate in order to do that. So perhaps I actually have a route in from that point of view. So I would, and I'm sure he would be absolutely ecstatic to say that, look, there's an international community of people who are willing to help that. Now, whether that coming from outside of the UK would be more difficult, I don't know, but we can certainly start posing those questions, and that makes it slightly more doable, don't you think?
There are also, there are also a lot of organisations in our home countries that would probably get on board and help us. There are a lot of philanthropic groups that are really keen on supporting initiatives, and if we could get ourselves organised to have some sort of inventory of stuff that we can send, then I think the logistical side of the process, we take Richard's approach and we build on it. But I think it's the first step is, as a community, is it something that we think we could do? And if we can do it, well, I mean, who doesn't just make things work as a perfusionist? It is in our DNA. For those of you who've done mission work, that you go somewhere, the kit's not as good as you expect, but you make it work. So I think, there's an opportunity for us if we're willing.
To my knowledge, the ELSO exchange of goods is, they have some kind of agreement with FedEx or something that the shipping is free. And that could be something, but what I think is that be it Epic CV or Perfusion.com or could be the kind of transit point where all the traffic is regulated. So maybe there's people that want to volunteer for that, or we could have a discussion about that online or something.
Absolutely. And whilst, if you're on that one,
It could be also for other regions in the world.
yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it was a comment was actually made, more of a throwaway comment about this meeting by a couple of people really, who said it's almost bizarre to see what effectively are competing companies at the staffing level all working together on this project. So yes, it's run by Perfusion.com / Epic CV, but Specialty Care are here, for example, and they put on the show last night. So there are certain elements that actually, I always try and think that this sort of idea of the education, the support, and what we're doing, it kind of transcends those things. So I think actually in this situation, there's the opportunity to actually for everybody to work together. And certainly from what I've seen over the last few days, they're more than willing to do that on something that is of this sort of importance. I mean, as most of you know, when watching Stepan's presentation yesterday, it was quite difficult to sort of ask questions afterwards, because it was incredibly moving, I suppose, for lack of a better word, harrowing in some respects. Just to remind you, everybody, we're talking about patients in corridors against one wall which is less likely to fall over than another. We're talking about them operating in nuclear bunkers so that they're safe from missiles. We're talking about them removing shrapnel and bullets from hearts, in hospitals that are getting shelled. I mean, it's remarkable, really.
It's lovely to see all those ideas. From European side, we already did some initiatives, mainly from Germany, because it's close by. So we definitely continue by providing goods, and in that way, it would be a pleasure and an honor to collaborate with other regions, especially in this particular situation.
And I think that raises a great point. It's in some ways, how can we support the European board in bringing that across? If you've got the facilities and the links, which obviously you have, then obviously you being here really does help us to have these conversations. But how can we then mobilize what we know, what we can do to help you? So I think maybe that is another sort of channel that we can really look to sort of help with. So thank you.
Yeah, there were. I just want to say something. There were 2 questions online, and one was about maybe we should start a repository of protocols for things that we don't encounter very much. And a second question was maybe someone should come and talk about all the trash that we produce and try to get rid of it. Well, sometimes you have to just look online, or because there actually is a repository of protocols that deal with these kinds of things, and it's on the MSEC website. And I don't think we have to invent the warm water. I mean, we have to disperse the information. And then secondly, we of course have later on someone who actually comes to talk about getting rid of all the trash. And so, for some problems, we already have the answers.
We do, but I would also say that this comes back to the conversation that we were having the other day around the education. At the moment, education is built in around individual countries educating to a certain standard, and I'm going to put Bruce on the spot in a moment and say he was talking about Perfusion without borders and how can we help educate across the globe. And I'm going to ask a controversial question, and people, please feel free to agree or disagree, but do you think that education should actually be taken out of the hands of a society? Should it be taken above that so that we don't have other sort of impeding factors? And I use that word deliberately to be slightly controversial. So do we need to actually kind of remove that and say there's a an international board that says this is what education should look like in all countries for the basics, and everything can then be built on it. I'm going to put that one out there. I don't know if anybody's got any comments. Bruce will have a comment. And even if he doesn't, he's going to now.
Thank you. I'd love to talk about global education. I'd agree with a lot of things you say. You're in America now, so as far as the let's take it away from the people and put it way up there, we're probably a little bit opposed to that. But I think we would, in a more market share perspective, if it's not profit driven, then if you give the stuff away, I've given some talks to make that point that there's absolutely no impediment to sharing the education. And there's no profit-driven reason to withhold the education. Great things can happen if everybody had the same level of education. So I'd rather grow it from the bottom up. The people that have something that's worthy of education, share it. The universities, get it somewhere else. Find some way to get it there virtually or physically. And with that, as the level of education becomes consistent across the world, then the discussion of immigration would become a single issue with regard to, well, we simply don't want that person to cross the border. But right now, they can point at, well, we don't want lesser educated people to cross the border. So let's raise the level of education, and the whole global movement of perfusion around the world will take a whole different tenor.
Yeah, I suppose if you think about it, we're talking about making repositories of equipment to send. What about a repository of individuals that are willing to donate their time? It's the same as going on the missions and doing it there. It's just you actually willing to give your time in order to help educate people in wherever it might be, in far-flung places, or even just online in order so that everybody can have access to see it. Now, obviously, it's always difficult. Not everybody has access to different resources in terms of, that sounds daft, but YouTube, for example, not all countries can you have computers, but is there something that we can create as a, how do you say, almost a sort of educational packet that we could send out to these areas, which would then aid them in whatever way they needed to? I don't know if you've got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we globalize education, if you will, it's about, what I've learned over the last, especially last 10 or 15 years from observing the support of the United States schools. They are very supportive of helping other people set up their programs. And it's apparent, as Bruce has just said, just how sharing educators are. And, maybe it's just providing a bit more access to that, or making it better known that programs are willing to help and support other people. But we've certainly found in our region that whilst you go down a pathway to develop your own program, if you need help, then the educators in the States are really there and willing to help. Sometimes the biggest impediment to progress is your own self-doubt and confidence about asking for help. And if you ask some of these guys, it doesn't have to be much, but a little bit of help from them, and you can move forward quite a bit. So, I mean, if we could develop some, I think we've sort of moved in a big circle there from the idea of maybe providing a bit of ongoing education online to supporting education programs. But why not look big? I guess ultimately, if we keep this conversation going, we'll get to registries and things like that as well.
Yeah, if I just may add a comment. So one question online was also about cooperation between schools in Europe and the US. And Gertie just had to leave because he had to catch a flight. But I think the European board is working on something like that, like an online. I'm not sure about the details, so I was just going to ask him. But they're working on a sort of education platform. Maybe it's something like MSEC University, but more multilingual, lingual. And yeah, anybody wishes to comment on those kinds of initiatives?
I think it's always difficult to put all those things together. I mean, it's not take it lightly how much work goes into translating a document, especially of some weight, into multiple different languages. You know, and you know, let's be honest. I mean, I'm British, which means that you know, we're notoriously bad at learning other languages because we're quite arrogant, or have been for many years. So we kind of just stick to English. But I think there needs to be a bit more broken down. That's just a cultural thing.
But the technology is there to do that.
I don't think anyone's too worried about. Yeah, we're all prepared to help translate into English for you.
No, I gave a talk for the Brazilian society, and they just put it on YouTube, and it gets translated into Portuguese. And I didn't know what I was saying, but that's what happened.
Do you know, we'll take the next question, but I've got an anecdote. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So go on.
I think you were mentioning the sharing of education across borders, and yeah, you were going to get some comment from Gertie, understandably. What we're offering here is we have several programs. There's more than one university in the States that has designed programs for the purpose of reaching across the border. South Carolina has an online program, brilliant program. So anybody in the world could, you know, if you meet the prerequisites, get their didactic education from wherever you are. We're initially trying it from a different angle, where we've taken the clinical. We have a 1-year master's degree, soon to be approved, but we've stripped the clinical off of it. And anybody in the world, you can come here, get the exact same courses as our students, and if you want, go through the exact same simulation, and then return to your country and do your clinical training there. We have an international graduate assistant program. We want to encourage, and we will pay an experienced perfusionist to come here and help us teach, and in the process get your American certification. So I think on some scale, doing more things like that starts the flow.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree.
Well, sorry if I may jump on that.
Yeah.
You touched a good point. Like, if they're willing to pay, so that's often a problem for people around the globe. So maybe there's a room for a scholarship fund, or I don't know, like organize that instead of.
Funny enough, you
shooting
mentioned
people in
that. I mean,
space.
I suppose we maybe don't sort of talk about it as much as we ought to, but just to give you some idea of the kind of internship and perfusion scholarship program that we do at Sanibel, just to, you know, to try and help out. So first and foremost, this meeting is obviously all about science and education, and that's the way we want to go. And as I said last year at the meeting, you know, the whole idea of this is that for as long as I have some part in it, registration to this meeting, whether it be in person or online, for students is absolutely free, and will remain absolutely free, because I think that is one of the biggest barriers to actually getting that education. So that's sort of one of the first points. The second point is that we have, I say, this internship program where the students can come and spend time. They're working not only behind the scenes, but they get to meet a lot of other, you know, sort of important people within the industry. And, you know, for them, it's almost like a job interview, realistically, you know. So there's, you know, obviously we expect a certain level of professionalism from them, because they are effectively meeting with people who may well be their next employer. So, but it's great for them to see not only what it looks like from behind the scenes, but also to then start mingling with other people in the industry. And, you know, as we were saying about the other day, that networking really then, you know, helps them get on. So, you know, we're trying to sort of kind of do that on a smaller scale. There's also no border limits to those that can apply. So, you know, if you're a student anywhere in the world, you can put in for this. Now, obviously, there's no infinite pot of money to try and do this, but, you know, for example, this year we had 2 students from the UK and 1 from Germany. You know, I would love that to sort of continue to expand, and, you know, maybe get some students across from Australia. Then they can translate what Bob's saying to me, and, you know, we can. And then we can sort of work together. But this is the sort of general idea that we've got. And then obviously the scholarship program, which you might see some of the students down there, they are being given the same sort of education in terms of that internship, but they go one step further, and this afternoon they will be presenting their research, and that we have a scholarship funding, which is very, very fortunate to actually be sponsored by Medtronic this year, who are taking this on. So, we're very fortunate from that. It gives them the opportunity to stand up in front of people, to present ideas, to grow and to learn. So, hopefully we can expand that and keep going. But again, as this grows, as the sort of money expands in terms of what we get from the registrations, the more we can pump back into that program and support them. George.
On a little tangent on that, in my opinion, one of the barriers to us accelerating innovation in our space is a lack of coordinated collaboration with our 3 societies. So, Rob, would you explain to the audience the 3S meeting that you have coming up this year, and how important that is to the work that you're doing there?
So I'll go back a step. In 2017, one of the initiatives we tried to get through the AMSEC organisation was a meeting that included the surgeons through the AATS, and I think through the SCA, the anaesthetic group. I may be wrong with the SCA, but it was a fantastic meeting in Boston. From that, I went home and the surgeon who I was working predominantly with became president of the Australian New Zealand Society of Cardiovascular Surgeons. I was coming up for a term of president of our college, and we were very keen to initiate a 3-society meeting, as in anesthesia, surgery, and perfusion. That's expanded now to include intensivists, not through their society, nursing, and it's just absolutely essential that these sort of meetings come in place. So ours is called 3SCATs, meaning 3 societies, and it's triennial, so it's every 3 years, because we also recognise the importance of our own meetings for our own professional groups. But what it does is it brings all of those people together, and we see the benefit. Over this meeting, we've had some awesome clinicians from other specialties come and talk to us, and we always appreciate when we get that input. And when they come to us, they appreciate just the input that we can put in. So it's something that you guys should be trying to really promote over here. Now, I'll do a shameless plug. There is a new meeting on the horizon in the States. It's called Teaming in Cardiac Surgery. It's going to be in Burlington, Vermont in October, and it has some really great people in the US who are leading it. Tor Sunt, he was president of the AATS when that combined meeting occurred, is the surgical lead. Jake Abernathy, who is an anaesthetist, he's leading it from their perspective. We have an intensive care leader, and then we've got Kenny Shan and Dave Fitzgerald leading it from Perfusion. And the concept of that meeting is that you register as a team. So the ultimate is that you take one surgeon, you take one anaesthetist, you take one perfusionist, you take one nurse, and you take one intensivist, and you go as a team to that meeting. And the idea is you wake up, you have breakfast together, you have lunch together, you have dinner together. It's 2.5, 3 days. And as a team, you learn. And I think that's incredibly important. And the other part of that initiative is it's going to be limited in registration to being a small meeting, so it can be intimate. But that's one step. But I think on a broader scale, a big meeting of the multi-societies, and then you can run your streams, you have your common sessions, and you have your specialty sessions. And I think that would be really good. So thanks.
I suppose also thinking about it, just a show of hands, how many of you have worked with either a surgeon or an anaesthetist or something that you have to struggle with because they don't really understand what we do? Any of your hands? So quite a large proportion. And I think that comes back to the idea that sometimes there is a mysticism that, we sit behind a pump, they say something and things happen. They're not entirely sure how, but, or they might say they want something and something else happens because actually what we do is benefit the patient rather than benefit the surgeon. I don't know if you agree with this, but I was once told that the best perfusionists in the world are the biggest liars. They're the ones that can actually say, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing, and then do the opposite. Because that's obviously the benefit of the patient rather than just pandering to the ego of the surgeon. Now, I wouldn't say I'm quite there yet, but I may occasionally tell a little fib and do the opposite. But there is the misunderstanding. I said little lie, not a complete lie. But I think, again, it comes down to this idea that there's a lack of maybe transparency, maybe knowledge that could be helped by having people brought together, as you say, in these different specialties. And a good example of that, for example, we're seeing it already in terms of the guidelines that Gertie was talking about. You're working with intensivist surgeons and perfusionists to write that document. So, there are lots of things or very similar concepts happening in pockets all over the world, which comes back to the idea of, well, how do we break those silos rather than have it in, you're doing it here, you're doing it there, you're doing it over there. How do we bring it all together? Marco.
Actually, as a former CVOR director, I had the impression that we were working in a large office with cubicles. Each one was in their cubicles and soundproofs. You did not hear whatever else or whatever other persons were doing. And I think the promotion, like the initiatives that you were just mentioning, or like the Senate Symposium, is to make sure that those barriers comes down and we have a free, clear communications among different professionals, because it is true. Whoever is at the pump is screaming at the doctor or vice versa, because actually they don't understand that we're doing the same job for the same patient that's under their care at that moment. Same thing with the anesthetist or anybody else in the intensive care or pre or post operations. So I think it would be valuable for the sake of a better patient care to have those individuals actually having. We used to have those rounds where everybody from different disciplines were actually talking, what is that we're going to do today for this particular difficult case, transplant or what have you. And that should be done also in events like this one here, where the walls are down and we have a clear communications to improve not only locally but internationally the caregiving.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think it's always, so some insight into sort of putting this together, and especially the scientific content, is you're trying to strike that balance of making sure that what you're putting out there is sort of, I suppose, perfusion centric, because it has to be relevant to what we're doing. But I suppose the question really is, would you, and again, show of hands, would it be beneficial for everybody to hear more from a surgical point or intensive point or a cardiology point of view in order to aid that education? So just a show of hands, would you say yes? What was it? Pocket. So again,
Can I have a comment? Maybe it's not that we need to see their point of view. I think we see a lot of their view, and they are not unwilling to share what they feel or what they think. Maybe it's more like trying to get together and talk to them and ask, how can we come towards each other? And they can tell their experience, but that doesn't help us in coming together in that maybe we should invite them and tell them about our experience or something like that. Like, how can we facilitate working together instead of just sharing experiences?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, is anybody willing to share their experience of trying to do something like that, and sort of what barriers they've faced? And so, Dom, because that might give us an idea of how we can sort of do this.
Yeah, one of the things that we found at Stanford, we have quite a great team that collaborates every day. They have meetings, talks. We're going over all the cases. Everybody has access to the data that they're looking at as well. So we see ourselves opening up and getting into this broad base of knowledge that you can collaborate real easily with the other surgeons and cardiologists and different internists, and they listen to us, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. We've got a strong team, has lots of years of experience, so they recognize the quality, the work that we're doing. And so I think that's an important thing, developing that, having strong leadership in your perfusion group, and having the hospital administrators quite, on top of it and listening to you and bringing you into the conversation. And there is another tangent, and I was just speaking to that. The FDA. How do we get around some of the things that have been mandated to us through drug allocations? And the prime drug is that I've always thought about was aprotenin, and how that disappeared from our armamentarium, and how we as perfusionists saw the effects of it and how good it was. And I think we have a voice that we can bring some things like that back into the conversation on a higher FDA level. So anybody want to go for it?
I mean, it's a great point. Obviously, as the token Brit, I'm not entirely sure in terms of the FDA. But I mean, I'll give you an example in terms of from the pediatric world. Almost all the drugs we use haven't got clearance. They're not licensed for use in children. It's just that we're a belligerent bunch and we just do it anyway. Now, I'm not advocating breaking the law. I know this is going out online, so just want to be very clear about that one. But things happen that you kind of need to work on. And Jim, unfortunately, can't be here. He's come back to graduation. Was talking about the idea that the immunoabsorption column that he was talking about for transplantation is not FDA cleared, but it's the sort of evidence is so compelling that he's looking at using it sort of compassionate usage in order to actually push it through that way. Now, obviously, I'm biased on that particular subject, but it's one of those things that actually it seems ridiculous that we have to take something that has been used for exactly the same purpose in a different country, then jump through all these hoops to show that it's exactly the same thing, when, as you could say, no, look, it works in there, you've got massive amounts of experience, why can't we just use it here? And then have to try and go through a back door. I don't understand it, but then again, I don't live in this system. I don't know whether it's any different in Australia or you have the same issues.
Look, I mean, we all have regulatory issues, and they seem to have got, a lot tighter, a lot harder. The hoops are much harder to get through. But I want to go back to your point about the multidisciplinary meetings that you guys have, which sound exemplary. It seems to me that there are certain barriers to that for a large proportion of the working perfusionist population, especially in the United States, where you have contract groups. And there is this, from my perspective, as a outsider, if you will, but also someone who's always worked in a institution, a university hospital-based institution, that I hear stories from perfusionists in America talking to me about, we can't get access to our notes because we're a contract group. We don't get told, we don't get invited to meetings like you're talking about because we're a contract perfusionist. Now, I'm sure there are equally examples where the contract perfusion team is very much integrated. Don't get me wrong. I'm just hearing the stories that get told to me. And, when you're trying to actively promote the team building and the teamwork, I think, the examples that Tor Sund has shared with us, and, there's that human factors group that's working to talk about what we're doing in the operating room. But, the briefing at the beginning of the cases, I think that's becoming a lot more common. The post-operation debrief, I think, is an incredibly rare event. I don't think that there's that many people who are doing it well. And I'm not going to do a show of hands because it's, I wouldn't be able to put my hand up, and therefore I wouldn't want to embarrass other people by having to force them one way or the other. But I think the debrief at the end of the case, to me, just makes so much sense. I find if you're working with someone you haven't worked with a lot and they're good, then the beginning of the case thing is just awesome. and understanding what you've sort of maybe not done well, what you can improve upon. And I will take issue with you, Richard. I'm actually a big advocate for, I never want to see a perfusionist say yes and do something different. I want that discussion to happen, and I want the surgeon, the team, to know exactly what's going on. I don't want to be working in a situation where I have to direct in a misleading way. I know.
Yeah, no, it's always been quite flippant, but no, it is absolutely right. You need to have that trust. And I think sometimes, I mean, realistically, the only time that really happens is when it's a fairly high pressure situation and they're trying to do something else, and actually now is not the time to have the big discussion about what the what the science is behind this. You just say yes, absolutely, and then you do whatever you need to do in order to sort of make the patient safe. That's not the sort of the baseline, but I completely agree. You need to have that trust, and the idea of I suppose, you know, looking at yourself, retrospective analysis of your own, you know, own performance really is paramount. And whilst in the team would be ideal, I think even a lot of us don't necessarily look at ourselves and say, well, how did I do on that case? And this comes back to perhaps, I don't want to go back into the data world, but I mean, George has just got the microphone. I was going to say dashboards, being able to see, well, what is it that I did? Because I think half of us don't look at it in that way. And, you know, if we don't know what we're doing, how can we improve it?
As we talk about collaboration, I think there's an elephant in the room that we all kind of ignore, and that's hospital administration. And that's the fourth entity that needs to come into this conversation. You know, in the United States, there's so much emphasis on pay for performance. And we need to understand how we fit into that puzzle, just because of the way that the money flows through the hospital and down to our departments and eventually into your pocket.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that in the context of knowing that there is, you know, in almost invariably where you've got a finite pocket of money that you're all competing against. I mean, I certainly would never want to be a hospital administrator. I think it's a thankless job in many respects, because everybody hates you. No matter what decision you make, you know, if you're giving more money to cardiac, then neuro get upset. If you're giving more money to neuro, well, the cancer services are getting upset. So, you know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I think that is part of the issue. So, but we've all got to stick up for our own little areas. No, Dom.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. I know we're short on time. I had the unique advantage, as well as Tristan. We were contract for a number of years. Yeah, I'm pointing to you. And we've gone in-house, which has really opened up a lot of people's eyes, administration inclusive, because they were dealing with one fixed point of payout. And now when we actually bill our hours to the hospital, they say, wow, you guys are doing all that too? And it's like, yeah. And, you know, so I think that's where it's really helped us as far as the respect and the colleague, you know, to colleague interface that we have going on now. They're actually really seeing the dedication that we've had over all these years, and it's all been under the black box scenario, and now it's out in the open. Pandora's box is open.
Yeah, thanks. I'm aware that we're kind of running out of time, and I mean, I suppose to some it may feel that we sort of haven't really come to any conclusions, but I think that would be slightly unfair or unkind. I think there's a lot of things we can take from this, and certainly sort of following on from this, I will definitely put people in touch regarding the Ukraine idea. And what we can do to help, and hopefully we can have something that maybe even for just 5 minutes next year we'll be able to say, actually, this is what's happened during that time, and you know, hopefully we have some positive news. So thank you for bearing with us. Hopefully this is interesting, and this sort of pivot has been you know, valuable to the discussion. So I want to thank Rob for stepping up at short notice to sort of help us out. But thank you all for your questions and comments. And I'm going to go and do a Chris Lemons interval, and then I should come back and continue with the program. So thank you very much.